Hey everyone, welcome to Story for Reddit. Today I am going to share with you a Reddit story. So if you are new to the channel, then please consider subscribing. Our teacher was a predator, so I taught him a lesson he would never forget. He wore midlife like a uniform, 2 tight dress shirts, the kind that strained at the sleeves, a cardigan as armor. He had the laugh that filled a room and the anecdotes that landed just right. He was the sort of man people liked or learned to like. The girls in my class smiled when he said the jokes, but the smiles never reached their eyes. They kept their heads down. At first, I told myself it was high school nerves. Then I started noticing the seams. He called on the girls more. He hovered over their desks. When he handed back papers, his hand would trail a beat too long, returning like a moth to a candle. His voice, when he spoke their names, went soft and intimacy placed where none belonged. Once, I found Emily pressed against the lockers, clutching her books like a shield. He was near, voice low and easy, too soft for public space. She nodded to something he said, but it was the kind of nod that means only one thing: escape. Not the way you nod when you're agreeing, I told her later. The way you nod when you just want to get away. She flinched as if I had struck her. I'm fine, she said. The words were hollow, like a bell struck and emptied. The pattern was a geometry of small violences. Extra help sessions that stretched after class. Special assignments only certain girls received. Lunch meetings in an empty classroom. I tried asking. They shut down quick as glass. He's strict. I don't want trouble. I need my grades. Fear had taste. It was metallic where it met the tongue. When I reported him, because I believed for a foolish time that institutions still functioned as they were supposed to, the adults smiled the inflicted smile. Mr. Hawthorne, they said, was a valued member of the staff. The counselors suggested misinterpretation. The principal nodded and wrote it down. Their faces were the color of people telling themselves a story in which bad things did not happen. That day I learned 2 things. 1, nobody here was coming to save the girls. 2, if someone was going to stop him, it would not be by signing forms or by playing fair. I started with watching. It felt perversely clinical cataloging gestures, noting timings, building a map of how his predator's mind worked. I kept a recorder in my pocket, a small humming thing that collected speech the way a jar collects moths. I recorded hours of him at ease private tones that didn't belong in a classroom. Come by after school. I can help you. Keep this between us. You have so much potential. The pieces fit into a picture that already made sense. I traced the pattern: further yearbooks, newsletters, the list of students he had singled out. Faces marched through the margins, different years, similar bruises. I reached out carefully through messages and comments that said nothing blunt, only offered to listen. Some messages died unread. Others answered. One, Amanda, wrote back terse and raw. He told her no one would believe her. They labeled her emotional. They suggested she transfer. She did. She wrote again later, I thought it was my fault for wanting attention. He said that looked better on a complaint than the truth. I built a file, a slow, obsessive architecture of testimonies, photos that showed hands lingering where hands should not linger, audio that captured a tone and a tactic. But a file is a thing kept in the wrong hands, easy to ignore, easy to archive away. Mr. Hawthorne had a reputation like a shield. Even the sharpest proof can dull against public affection. If I wanted him undone, I had to make his world reject him, and for that I needed something he thought he owned: privacy. I became his shadow with a smile. I stayed after class, laughed at his jokes, asked for extra help, made myself useful. Predators are like emperors with a small court. Flatter them, and they let you see everything. He spoke of parties staff arranged, of private jokes and favors exchanged, of boundaries flexed until they broke. He was proud of his taste for special girls, casual in his contempt. He never suspected the side of me that cataloged and stored. When it came to the device and object he thought belonged to him, I'll let the fiction keep its mystery. I placed something with a pocket of intent in his space, something that, when he used it, turned his solitude into a glass room. What I took from it I would never publish as instruction. It is enough to say that it collected his small betrayals, photos, messages, the kinds of images men make of other people's children when they think no one is looking. They were obscene not for what they showed in legal terms, Those are the details institutions debate, but for what they revealed about his appetite and method. I archived every piece, not as a hacker's trophy, but as a ledger of harm. He believed himself clever. He liked gadgets and screens and the false privacy they promised. I used the things he trusted as lanterns, and in their light his shape showed unmistakably. Creating a bait account was theater. I made a persona that looked like one of the quieter students. Believable posts, the right slang, an inside joke or two. It took patience and a careful mimicry of adolescent noise, but predators are careless in the face of praise. He messaged. He softened. He offered to help with grades. I saved it all. A parent account, similarly fictive, pulled another thread. He obliged, he courted. Screenshots, archived messages. Every solicitation became a stone in a pile I would eventually topple. Prom gave me the stage. He volunteered to chaperone, of course he did. The gym smelled like cheap punch and hairspray. Like every night in which young bodies tried on being other people. I planted what needed planting in his car and set what needed setting in motion elsewhere. The night was loud, the lights dimmed, kids danced in clumps. At 9 o'clock, when the music was a tide and the camera phones were warm with filtered faces, the projector snapped to life. The giant screen filled with him. Photos he'd taken, images he'd hoarded, words culled from messages he thought no one would read aloud. The room stopped as if someone pulled the air out. There was a keening sound, a child's sound, pure panic and disbelief. He went gray, then white, then the color of a man who sees a life he built turn to a monster's face. He tried to run. Security was already there, as if summoned by the collective breath of 100 witnesses. Phones came up, videos proliferated, the image of him, huge, felled any convenient defense. The administration moved first with its scripts. We are investigating. We take such allegations seriously. Their faces, though, were the same as before. Paper-pressed, soft with self-preservation. That left the outside. I fed the files to hands that could not ignore them. Press, parents, social threads that do perversely what institutions refuse to do, they spread. Within 48 hours, his name and his images were everywhere. Victims who had been buried by shame and small-town quiet found the courage to speak when they could no longer be mistaken for anomalies. The police opened a case. Old wounds reopened and felt, finally, like something that might be stitched. But I wanted more than ruin. I wanted a mirror held up so his own horrors would be reflected back, relentless. I sent anonymous tips. Cultivated gossip like a crop-fake job offers that contained reporters in waiting, calls that turned into photos of him loitering, files pushed into the hands of landlords and employers. He scraped together bail and crawled back into the world for a while, but his life was radioactive. People whom he'd once charmed now looked at him with an expression that made him small. Then I went to the place he thought was his last sanctuary, an old cabin upstate, a weathered house like a memory. It was not hard to find. Men who think themselves invisible rarely plan for the tenacity of hatred. I visited in the dark and left reminders photos pinned to trees, recorded voices that played in the wind, a cassette of his own words looped until sleep became a trap. He called the police. They found nothing legally actionable, only the sound of his own past playing back at him. Night after night, he woke at every rustle. Fear is a force. It learned him. I did not invent his destruction, I amplified it. I pulled at the threads of the life he'd woven, old photos, award ceremonies, letters from parents, then set them on display online, a digital gallery of the lie he'd lived. The site I made was simple and brutal, a catalog of testimony, pictures that bore witness, names, dates. I sent the link everywhere it might hurt the most. The community, former employers, the parents who had entrusted their children to him. He tried legal threats, frantic messages full of excuses. He threatened, pleaded, attempted to bury the truth in counterspeech. There is no coming back from certain revelations. The education board eventually moved where the school would not. A quiet, bureaucratic extinction. His pension thin, the last thread of a life was revoked. Licenses were pulled. Honors were scrubbed. The institutions that had once dressed him in accolades stripped him to an unadorned person and shunned him. I watched him once more from the distance that lets you see a man in full ruin. There he was on the porch of the cabin, a figure carved from shame. Pale, thinner, the arrogance eaten away. He had become what he had made others feel: exposed, small, tremulous. I did not gloat. There was no satisfying triumph in seeing a broken vessel. I stood long enough to see the shape of a man reduced to the sum of his sins. There were other things. Some victims found a measure of peace, others found only the next shape of their hurt. I had given them a mirror, but not a cure. For myself, the victory tasted of ash. It made me sick, sometimes in a way that felt deserved. There were nights I woke and heard the echo of what I had done. A soft voice that asked if I had become what I hated. I told myself the answer was no. Then I would remember the faces of the girls who had never had a chance, and the difference between the two things blurred. Monsters, I learned, do not just need cages, they need mirrors. They must be forced to see themselves, and sometimes that sight must come from hands willing to do what institutions will not. Justice is not tidy. It is a thing scraped out of the dark. I walked away with a file burned into my chest, a ledger of right and wrong that I would carry like a scar. When I turned my back, the porch light flickered and went out, and the woods swallowed him whole. That's it for today. Hope you have enjoyed it. If you do, then be sure to subscribe for the next Reddit story.